Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with Victory 4x4. In this video, we're going to be installing our off-grid floor system in the back of our Lexus GX470. So we'll begin our disassembly here in the back with the removal of the third row seats. Now, I've already taken one out. We're going to show you here on the passenger side how they come out, as that process is the same regardless of which side you're on. So you'll start over here by removing this side cover. There's just kind of a grab handle there you can pull up, and then a couple tabs that will release along with it. So underneath that cover, you'll be looking for this kind of red-orange release lever. You'll simply push that toward the outside of the vehicle, and that'll release this side locking bar for the seat here. So then down underneath the seat, you can pull the small handle here. That'll release the lower latches, and then this whole assembly can kind of be lifted up and removed from the back of the vehicle. Once you have the seats out of the way, these side covers can simply be reinstalled into their original location. Then we can remove the lower trim here, as well as these outer cargo hooks. So on the center trim, you'll just need a flat screwdriver. There's going to be one of these little covers on each end that you can get the screwdriver under the small cutout there. And then at each end, there's going to be a small screw. You'll just need a 10mm socket or a Phillips head, and those can easily be removed. And then with the screws removed from both ends, there's just one small plastic clip here under the center, so you can kind of get your hands under this and just pull basically straight up, and that should release the clip. If it gets left in here, you'll just need a panel removal tool, or you can even get a screwdriver underneath the edges of these to pop them up and free from the vehicle. Then on the tie-down hooks, you can simply pop the hook up, and then you'll get your flat screwdriver or a pick in under the edge of this plastic cover piece. That'll pop up, and then you can kind of work that out through the hook itself to get it out of the way. And then again, grab your 10mm socket, go ahead and unscrew those, and then the entire hook assembly can be removed. Then we can move back here to this lower trim panel. So this is going to have 5 screws hidden under little covers. Again, take your flat screwdriver or your pick, simply pop these covers up, and the entire cover can be removed. And then you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver or bit like I have here, and you can simply back all 5 of those out and remove the screws. So then once you have all 5 screws removed, you can take a panel tool. I've got a plastic one here just so we're not marring these up any more than necessary. And then I'm going to start it under this end. You can kind of hear there the first clip pop, and then you can just work your way along this panel, popping the remaining clips and getting it free from the vehicle. Now that we have all that out of the way, this carpet is actually free to come out of the vehicle. So we can kind of just pull up in the center, and that'll start sliding it out from under all the outer trim sections. And then it's just Velcroed up here to that forward carpet section. So that'll be the last thing fighting you and holding that in place. So now that we have the vehicle disassembled, we can start with some assembly on the floor frame. So we'll start out with kind of the rear cross brace here, easily identifiable by the logo, but also all of these pieces are going to have kind of a laser etched number in them here. They're all going to start with 47 for 470, and then this one specifically is part number 3. Next, we'll grab part number 5. That's going to be your center section here. You're going to want the end with the number cutouts toward this rear cross rail, and then basically using the holes you'll see here and the corresponding holes in the back of this rail, we're going to bolt those together using 1/4-20 button head bolts with washers, along with serrated flange nuts from our hardware pack. So we kind of flip both of those over here just so you can see the hardware going into place. It doesn't necessarily matter which direction you run this hardware, as long as the tools you're using can fit in here to tighten things up. So specifically on the bolt head side, it's going to be a 5/32 hex, and these serrated flange nuts should kind of just bite into the material and tighten up on their own. If you do happen to need a wrench, or if they're not grabbing very well, that'll just be a 7/16. And with both bolts in place, you can tighten those up. Next, we'll move on to part number 2. Now there is going to be kind of a left and a right here. The only way really to identify those is just to hold them up kind of to the back of this rear section and make sure that these inner mounting flanges are facing just that in toward the center of the vehicle, like so. Now after you've identified kind of your lefts and rights there, you're also going to want to find and determine which is going to be your left and right of these outer trim panels. So number 7 here is going to go out on the outside of this passenger side rail, and number 6 out here on the outside of the driver's side rail. So starting here on the passenger side, you're going to have 3 bolt holes to line up with those 2 sections, and then again it's just going to be 1/4-20 mounting hardware holding those in place. So once installed, the passenger side should look something like this, with your 3 bolts tight holding those 2 together, and then this can be assembled and installed to that rear kind of cross brace. So you'll bolt these 2 together just like you did that center section, and then the only difference out here is now you have this additional hole to line up and install another button head bolt with nut on the bottom side. And then just like in the center, with all your hardware started, you can take your 5/32 and tighten these up. Now this driver's side rail is going to assemble and install largely the same as the passenger side. The only real difference is this 90-degree kind of trim section here that will also bolt to 3 holes along the outside edge, again with 1/4-20 button heads. So then once you get that fully installed, it should look just like this and can be bolted in to this outside corner, following the same steps as that passenger side. Then the last part you're going to be left with is this forwardmost crossbar section. This is going to be part number 4. It's going to bolt to the forward edge of the center brace here using these 2 mounting holes, and then it'll bolt to the insides of these outside rails using the 2 mounting holes on the end here. So then we can just slide this in between these 2 outer rails. There's just a little bit of tension on it, which actually kind of works out because it should help hold that just a little bit while I get a bolt started here. And again, in these locations, the direction of the hardware doesn't really matter as long as you can access it with your Allen wrench or the tools you're using. Now once your frame is fully assembled, it should look just like this, and we can then move into the back of the vehicle. Once the carpet has been removed, we'll take this rear trim panel and reinstall it. That's simply lining it back up, getting the clips to pop back into place, and then reinstalling the Phillips head screws along with the plastic covers. So with the assembled frame, you will have to kind of slide it into the vehicle on an angle like I have here. So just kind of be careful as you're going in. Make sure you're not running it into too much. And then you should be able, once you get in here far enough, to just kind of slide it down flat and get it sitting down here on the cargo floor. Now once you have the frame sitting in here on the floor, you're going to want to find the 4 M6 stainless button head bolts. These are going to be the only stainless bolts in your bolt pack. And then we're going to be installing them just loosely for now into the outer mounting holes along these flanges. So that's just going to be 2 per side. And these are going into factory threaded holes. So those 4 outer bolts just installed loosely are basically acting as locating pins for this entire frame assembly at this time. And then what we're going to do is come in here to this center rail and just mark at these 2 mounting locations, because we're going to need to then remove this frame one time and drill and install 2 M6 riv nuts into these locations. Now with your holes marked, you can then remove those outer mounting bolts, and then we'll lift this back out of the vehicle one time to get our riv nuts installed. Now with the frame removed, you'll see the 2 marks we made here. In those locations, we're going to center punch first, and then we're going to drill and install the riv nut inserts. Now for this step, we're going to provide you with a 23/64 drill bit. That is the pilot hole size for the M6 riv nuts. We're also going to recommend that you start out with a smaller pilot hole. So I just grabbed an 1/8 inch bit here, and I believe this one's 1/4 from our set to kind of work our way up to that final hole size. Now I am going to start with my small 1/8 inch drill bit. I don't have a drill stop for that one, but I do want to show you one here on my 1/4 inch, as well as one I'm going to be using for the 23/64. If you don't have a set of these, they're going to be super helpful. We recommend you pick them up just so that you can limit the depth here and you're not going to drill into anything critical underneath this floor. Now again, starting with my 1/8 inch, I don't have a drill stop on this one, so I'm just going to be as careful as possible. Now with my 1/4 inch bit with a drill stop installed. It was a little better, did what it was supposed to do. And then lastly, that provided 23/64 bit. Then real quick, with those holes drilled out, I will kind of just double check, make sure that the riv nut slides down in there and seats fully against the material before coming back and cleaning up all this mess. So when you're getting these riv nuts installed, you're going to have a couple different options. One that we provide is going to be this small riv nut tool here, which we'll go over in just a minute. And then you're going to have a lot of options out there on the internet as far as riv nut tools that you can purchase that are just going to make this a little bit easier. So if you plan to do a ton of modifications to your vehicle and you see yourself using these more in the future, you're probably going to want to pick up an aftermarket installation tool. And if you're just doing these 2 riv nuts here for this one product, go ahead and use our tool. It'll be just fine to get you through this. So one I wanted to mention is just this kind of hand riveter style. If you've ever put in any pop rivets with something like this, you simply thread the riv nut on the end here. There's a little bit of adjustment that has to be made, but obviously they'll have instructions, and then squeeze it to get them installed. And then the other, which we really like that we have here, is something like this. It's got a lot of different inserts for the ends, so you can use a lot of different style and thread of riv nuts. Obviously we're already set up for M6, so basically you just thread it on the end, make sure you have good thread engagement, and then this other end is powered by a drill. So it's just hold the tool, run the drill until you feel it basically stop down here once inserted, and you're good to go. So as for our tool, it's going to be this long kind of fully threaded bolt passing through a washer, the kind of long high nut you see here, and then a star washer followed up by the riv nut itself that you will thread on here each time you're getting one of these installed. Now the last thing you want to do here with your holes before you get the nut inserts installed is something to protect the now unpainted surface where we drilled the holes. You can use some touch-up paint and wait for it to dry, or what we're going to use is just a little bit of RTV sealant, kind of putting a thin bead on there, spreading it around. You can wipe off any excess so you don't make a huge mess. And then you're just going to take that fully assembled tool with the nut insert, press it down into the hole like so. Then you'll need a 1/2 inch wrench to hold kind of the high nut here in the center. That's just going to help keep the riv nut from rotating. And then you'll need a 10mm socket here on the bolt passing all the way through to get this thing compressed into place. What I'm going to use and what I'm going to recommend is a powered drill like I have here with adjustable torque settings. And that way you can kind of dial this back a little bit so that you don't use the full torque of the drill and potentially damage the threads in the nut insert. It'll kind of just ratchet and stop as it tightens up on that sheet metal. Then it's just a matter of holding your wrench and running the drill. You may have to back off for just a second and adjust your torque, but kind of start light so that you don't over compress this and damage it, and work your way up. You should kind of feel that stop as it gets fully compressed. And then you can simply back the whole assembly out. And get it set up for your next rib nut installation. So then you'll just repeat that process on the remaining hole to get that other rib nut installed, and then just come back, take a look, make sure they both look nice and centered. Nothing looks like it needs to be compressed anymore, and then we can get that floor frame back in the vehicle. Now, one more thing I want to mention before we get this frame fully secured down here in the vehicle is you're also going to receive this edge trim. This is for the outer edges of these kind of outer filler panels here. That's just something you can install if you're worried about preserving the appearance and kind of keeping your outer trim panels scuff free out here. Obviously, you can see ours have sustained a little bit of damage over time, so we're just going to install this one without it at this time. But if you're going to be putting this on, it's as simple as kind of getting this edge opened up. You can use your fingers, you can use a flat screwdriver, whatever it takes, and then there's adhesive down in there. So as you press this on along the outside edge of here, it will also kind of stick in place and stay on there over time. Now that we're installing the floor frame for the final time, you can grab those 6 M6 button heads you had earlier, along with the 6 larger diameter washers from your hardware pack. You'll begin installing those into the 4 kind of perimeter holes that we used earlier, as well as now the 2 center rib nut inserts. Once you get all 6 of those loosely in place, grab a 4mm hex and tighten everything up. Now you guys are probably going to notice in your bolt pack that you're going to receive a couple extra of these M6 rib nuts. The reason for that is with a couple of these being a little bit older vehicles, we found some of our screws, the threads were getting a little bit questionable as they were kind of rusty as they were coming out, and we actually had to drill one of ours out and install an M6 rib nut just like you have here before we could get our floor frame bolted in. So we just give you those extras as an option in case you guys run into that same issue or you break a bolt off getting them out. You have a solution right on hand. Then one last minor little thing you'll see right here is those little clips from the bottom of the factory trim panels that were over top of the carpet. We just slid those out of there. They're just in a little bit of a slot kind of thing. Popped them back into the holes here in the floor. That's just to prevent any elements, water, moisture, whatever, coming up from underneath and getting in underneath our floor here long term. You can do that, you cannot do that. You can even just put a little RTV over those holes if you so choose, but that's a quick, simple solution there. Next, we can move on to getting the floor panels installed. So a couple key things here. You're gonna look for a small 4/7 cutout that goes toward the front of the vehicle. It doesn't matter which way you have this aside from that. And then you're gonna see these series of slots along the panel. What those are for is installing the provided nut strips. There's a couple different ones that you may have depending on which accessories you're trying to install. So with your floor, you're gonna receive this 3-hole nut strip like I have here. These are for the drawer assemblies that you may be putting in here. If you're installing and purchasing one of our fridge slides, you're gonna get a smaller, different set of nut strips with those. Those go specifically with the fridge and can be installed at this same time right before the panels go in. So these are just going to get installed to the bottom side of these slots. Make sure the pre-installed nuts are pointing down, and then you can line it up and start a bolt with a washer here in the center. And then I'm just going to be kind of lining this up roughly with the center of the slots so that our drawers sit centered on the panel. And then I'm just going to loosely install a bolt here in this outer slot. That's just going to hold the nut strip from rotating as I'm getting everything tight. So with that lined up, I'll grab my 5/32 hex and just tighten this in place. Once I've done that, this outer bolt can come back out until we're actually bolting the drawer down to the panel. Now, as for the fridge slide nut strips, Again, they're going to be much smaller, about 2 inches long, and they'll line up and install in a very similar manner, with the outside mounting holes here being the actual bolt hole location that you'll secure the fridge slide down with. Now, for more detailed information on getting those particular nut tabs installed, you want to check out the fridge slide installation video. In this case, we are planning to install drawers over on our driver's side. So I've installed the full series of nut strips here, and now this panel can simply be dropped in here to the frame, lined up, and we can begin installing more of our 1/4-20 button heads, again with washers in all of these perimeter mounting holes. So with this panel in and all the perimeter hardware loosely installed, we'll now grab our second panel, get it prepped with the nut strips, following those same steps as before, and I'll get that loosely in place here as well, just like this, before we tighten down any further hardware. Now in this installation, we are installing a fridge over on our passenger side, so I do now have those smaller nut tabs. You can see where my pre-installed nuts are lined up with the small holes on the outside. There's a bolt holding them in place there. And then on the back side, those do get a serrated flange nut. But again, these nut tabs and their specific hardware is only going to come with the fridge slide. So if you're trying to get this all done in one shot, make sure you have your fridge slide when you're installing your floor. Then once you have all your respective nut tabs in place, just like the driver's side, this will drop in, making sure that 4/7 cutout is toward the front of the vehicle. Once we get that in place, it's just like the other side again, 1/4-20 button heads with washers all the way around the perimeter, and get those started by hand before tightening anything up. Now with both panels in and all their mounting hardware loosely in place, you can work your way around with that 5/30 seconds and tighten things up. So then once you get all that hardware tight, your floor installation is complete. So again, for more information on the drawers and fridge slides and how to get those installed, check out their individual product pages and corresponding videos. And as always, if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out. You can send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or just give us a call at 269-459-8447.